Yeah, we're going. So I thought we could maybe do a little check-in and see who's in the room. There's too many of us to do a go around, which is what I really like to do, and hear people's voices and see people's faces. But I wonder if people want to just put in the chat maybe your name and your pronouns, and if you're with a team or have like a 350 PDX role, you can put that in there too. And maybe a little prompt of what was the first thing you did when the air quality got better last week. Let's see, I want to see 47 messages in there. Okay, we got Felice, who ran around. Someone who bought an air filter? Oh, you turned on an air filter. I bought an air filter. I didn't have one for the entire bad air quality, so I used the opportunity to finally get one. I'm prepared next time. Chris Smith went for a bike ride. People went running, walking, breathing, eating corn cob outside. Yeah, it was a bit of a relief, a wake-up call followed by a relief. I'm glad we're not still in it, but not glad that it might happen more often unless we do something about it, which is what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to introduce now Felice, who is one of the co-leads of our forest defense team, who's going to do a little bit of grounding for us and then introduce our amazing keynote speaker. Over to you, Felice.
Hi, how's it going? As Chris said, my name's Felice Kelly, and I'm with the Forest Defense Team. And I think last week was difficult for everyone in Western Oregon, especially those of us who think a lot about climate change. Even though we know that the landscape will recover from fire, we still mourn the people and places lost to the blazes, and I think our uncertain future. So I wanted to read an excerpt of a recent piece by Terry Tempest Williams that she wrote as a response to the current forest in the West that I found useful. It is called A Burning Testament. She wrote, I raise my fist to a smoke-choked sky to honor the holy creatures, human and wild, who have lost their lives and homes to the galloping flames like riderless horses burning through the West. Unable at times to distinguish day from night, we only have a blood-red sun and an orange-faced moon exchanging places in the sky to orient us as temperatures rise, fires rage, and before our eyes, in a flash, a neighboring national forest becomes the charred citadel of a vibrant world. Gone. We are saying farewell to what we love and why we stay. How can we stay? The landscape of the American West is burning, and we are burning too. This is freedom unmasked. We have a right to live as we wish, until we can't. Our reckless history of human habitation in the American West is on a collision course with the climate crisis. Climate change is not a hoax. It is real, and it is a fire-breathing dragon blowing fire at our doors. We cannot breathe. This is our mantra in America now. We cannot breathe because of the smoke. We cannot breathe because of a virus that has entered our homes. We cannot breathe because of police brutality and too many Black bodies dead on the streets. We cannot breathe because we are holding our breath for the people and places we love. I was asked to write an obituary for the land, but I realize I'm writing an obituary for us, for the life we have lost and can never return to. And within this burning of Western lands, our innocence and denial is in flames. The obituary will be short. The time came and these humans died from the old ways of being. Good riddance. It was time. Their cause of death was the terminal disease of solipsism, whereby humans put themselves at the center of the universe. It was only about them, and in so doing, we have been dead to the world that is alive. To the power of these burning, illuminated Western lands, who have shaped our character, inspired our souls, and restored our belief in what is beautiful and enduring, I will never write your obituary. Because even as you burn, you are throwing down seeds that will sprout and flower, trees that will grow, and forests that will rise again as living testaments to how one survives change. Let this be a humble tribute, an exaltation, an homage, and an open-hearted eulogy to all that we are losing to fire, to floods, to hurricanes and tornadoes, and the invisible virus that has called us all home and brought us to our knees. We are not the only species that lives and loves and breathes on this miraculous planet called Earth. May we remember this and raise a fistful of ash to all the lives lost that it holds. I will mark my heart with an X made of ash that says, "The power to restore life resides here. The future of our species will be decided here, not by facts, but by love and loss." Hand on my heart, I pledge allegiance to the only home I will ever know. Yeah, that really hit me when I heard it on the radio. So, as Chris mentioned, our speaker today is Brenna Bell. She is the policy director and staff attorney at BARC, which is a local nonprofit dedicated to defending and restoring deep understanding of these issues, coupled with extensive knowledge of the intricacies of environmental law. And today she's going to lead us on a deep dive into wildfires, the link to the climate crisis, myth-busting forest policy, and how to take action now through urging better policy and supporting affected communities through mutual aid. Brenna, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Elise. And hopefully that introduction helped me like stop crying, because the emotions are up right now. You know, it doesn't take much to get them going. So, I'll dive into trying to share my screen, and hopefully dealing with tech will settle me so we can get into this. Let's see if this will work. Okay, here we go. Yeah. All right. I'm going to give you a little slideshow, I think. Here we go. So some of you might have come expecting Alex Harris to give this presentation. Alex is a fantastic organizer, but he's also about to start his first week of graduate school at Western Washington University this week. And my phone is ringing right now. So sorry about that. I'm going to turn off the ringer. Be right back.
Just a heads up to everyone, we're going to have an action after this, and we're going to ask you to write a letter to the legislators, either on a piece of paper in real life or on an email. So if you're down to write a letter to your legislators on a piece of paper, you might want to grab one of those at some point in the next half an hour. Okay, Brenna.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. So I'm pinch hitting for Alex, but it was actually a fantastic process today to think about, in the context of the fires that just happened, what's really going on. So Felice introduced me and BARC a little bit, so I'll just kind of skip that. But if you'd like to get out into the forest, we are starting to take people out there again once Mount Hood's open, because it's closed. So first it was coronavirus, now there's fires, the entire forest is closed to visitors, but when it's open again, we'll be there. But before I dive in, I want to take a minute and think about the history of how we got to this moment. And a big piece of that history is the fact that we are currently residing on stolen land. And here are the names of some of the peoples who lived in Oregon. It was an incredibly densely populated area with over 60 tribes, speaking 40 different languages, weaving their lives together with the earth in ways that we don't even have a sense of now, because so much was broken through colonization. But these people are still here. They exist differently on the landscape now because of displacement. But when we acknowledge that we are the recipients of stolen land, we need to not invisibilize the fact that all of the tribes are still here and working to move back into thriving. And that's going to weave through here, because in this talk, one of the main ways that people tended the land for time immemorial was through fire. In the Willamette Valley, the Umpqua, the Rogue Valley, these valleys were shaped by indigenous burning. The higher level areas of the Cascade forests were shaped by burning. The main land management tool indigenous people had in this area for food, for materials, was burning the landscape. And that shaped our forests in ways that white folk didn't recognize and didn't realize. And so when the patterns of settlement radically changed, when the US government extinguished native title, passed the Oregon Donation Land Claims Act, and flooded the West with, quote, bona fide white settlers who got 640 acres to tame. When that happened, the land patterns started radically shifting. Those cycles of burning slowly ceased. Now, honestly, there were a lot of early settlers who saw the native approach to burning and incorporated into their lives. But as indigenous people from the valleys got pushed to the sides, to the Grand Ronde Reservation, to the Warm Springs Reservation, and it was more and more exclusively white settlement in Oregon, people forgot that fire was part of the land, forgot that humans lighting fires was part of the way that these ecosystems developed. And not only did they forget, but when people tried to start fires, it became illegal. And it remains illegal for many, many years. In Northern California, many indigenous people actually lost their lives. They were executed because they tried to bring forward their indigenous practices of burning. And so the shape of the landscape changed in many ways when indigenous people were no longer actively working the land. One of the biggest things was the exclusion of yearly planned anthropogenic fire. And in their place came the United States Forest Service, which is still the largest land manager in Oregon. And their approach to fire management really started getting solidified in the 1920s through 40s, and it had two main focuses. One is prevent fires, a lot of it through education. Most of you recognize Smokey the Bear, one of the first and most successful anti-fire memes ever. And then also, so there was education about prevention with the idea that only you could stop wildfires, that it was in the province of human agency to stop all wildfires. There was the prevention arm. There was also the suppression arm. They had what was called the 10 a.m. policy, where by 10 a.m. the morning after an ignition, the Forest Service expected firefighters to put that fire out. And now this is kind of a big ask, but after World War II, the Army came home, the military came home with two main things. One was a lot of machinery, and two were a lot of veterans. And the Forest Service capitalized on that and created a basically militarized response to fire starts in the 40s that has been maintained to this day. They no longer have the 10 a.m. rule, but it's in essence the default of what they do. There's still a full suppression mentality for the Forest Service. So we're up to the 40s. We have indigenous burning extinguished, and now even all natural ignitions are getting extinguished. So there's this growing lack of fire on the landscape. And the weather was cooperating with the Forest Service. This is a graph that shows what's called the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. And it shows over time, starting before 1920 up to 2015, the millions of acres burned, and then above is the climactic patterns around the PDO, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. And we were in this very wet period, this cool, wet period. You can imagine the first section is like the Dust Bowl, right? The Great Fires of 1910 and 1918, the droughts in the Midwest, was during a very hot, dry period. And then our weather pattern changed. And the weather pattern change happened to coincide with full fire suppression. So one of the things it meant was that humans got it in our head, modern industrial humans got it in our head, that we were the ones stopping all the fires, and that normal meant not a lot of fire. So starting in the 1940s, like right around when at least my parents were born, so like this generation above me grew up with this expectation that there weren't a lot of fires in the West. There wasn't smoke in the air, that normal meant an ecosystem without a lot of fire. And that's been passed on. So our expectation of normal was the coincision of a cool, wet period, the cessation of indigenous fires, and full suppression. So most fire ecologists would say we are currently in a fire deficit on the landscape. I know that's not what people like to hear, but if you look at the science and the patterns, that's what's true. So we're going to go into now what makes fires happen, and then what can we do about it going from here. But I wanted to give you a little bit of history, mainly because a lot of people, when they talk about fire, start in 1984, which is when really good fire records started being kept by the US government. And fire is like a biogeological pattern. You can't look at those starting in 84. So we have to go back at least 100 years. If we had more time, we'd go back farther. But there are patterns around fire and weather and human practices that all interact and get us to where we are now. But I'm trying to stay focused. So I'll stick to my slides. This is my way of making sure I didn't go off on too many tangents. So what factors influence fire behavior in an admittedly incredibly simplistic approach? Because there's a lot that affects every specific fire. Each one is different. But the three main things that people look at when we're talking about how do we deal with fires or what can we expect from fires are ignitions, fuel, both the type of fuel and how dry the fuel is, the aridity of the fuel, and the climate, long-term weather trends, and specific weather events. So we're going to talk a little bit about each of those, because a lot of people are thinking, how are these fires connected to climate change? We're going to get into that a little deeper. So first is ignition sources. They're necessary. Can't have a fire without a spark. And we could do a whole playlist of just those songs, I think. And there's two main approaches. There's the naturally lit fires with lightning, and those happen for sure, but by far and away, the most common ignitions are not lightning sources. They are unintentional human ignitions. Again, going back to smoky, most of us all are tracking that abandoned campfires are a very common ignition. So people using the forest, often it's connected to roads. The more density of roads there are, the more unintentional human ignitions there are. But one of the types of ignitions that is gaining more and more attention, and it's not something that Smokey the Bear talks about, is power lines. And I want to focus on power lines because of the role that they played in the most recent slew of fires in Oregon. Because those fires started with a windstorm. We'll get more into wind when we talk about weather. And I have a couple of kind of specific stats that I wanted to tell you about these last slew of fires. So on September 7th, getting ready for the fires, PGE turned off part of its power grid near Mount Hood. So the 26 Canyon, that corridor, y'all might have noticed there wasn't a huge fire down that. It's one of the only Western valleys that didn't get one. And that's in large part because PGE turned off the grid in that part of the forest. However, 70 miles south along the Santiam Canyon, PGE and other energy providers chose not to turn off the grid. And at least 13 fires were started because of downed power lines. And those were all small fires that then combined into the devastating Beachy Creek fire that roared down the Santiam Canyon. So there's an element of prevention here. I ended up reading a lot about power line driven fires today and what you can do about them, because it doesn't seem like that's showing up in any of our policy discussions right now. But I'll just say two quick things on that. One, you can turn off the power grid. It's inconvenient to some, but it's a short-term inconvenience, a lot less than having your house burned down. And two, new power lines can be installed underground. And there is not huge movement to do that, even though power lines underground do not start forest fires. So it's something that I want to spend a little bit more time on, because it's not been mentioned much as we think about fire, but it's becoming more and more a part of our fire discussion, is the way, and you know, you're a climate change group, you think about power, right? Power lines start fires. So let's talk about fuel. Now, fuel gets a little too much discussion sometimes because it's one of the things that humans feel like we can control. But there's a very simple question. If you were going to start a fire, what kind of wood would you like? When you start a campfire, do you go and find the biggest, wettest pieces of wood around and try and light those? Or are you looking for small, dry fuel? And as the pictures show, those large, wet pieces are often found in older, mature forests. And those small, dry pieces are often the result of logging operations. Some logging operations that are even ostensibly for fuel reduction, but leave the slash untreated on the ground. But the main thing isn't even size or quantity of fuel. It's fuel aridity. It's how dry the fuel is. And again, as anyone who started a fire knows that that is true. The drier your fuel is, the easier it is to get it burning. And we're going to touch a little bit more on that when we talk about weather as well. Because truly, it's all about the climate, right? There's the ignition piece, there's the fuel piece, but without the right weather conditions, without the climatic changes, there are no large fires. And so we're going to dig in a little bit to climate and the way that's interacting with fire. So if you're like me, your people are blocking 2019. You want to see 2019 on this graph. This is wildfire acres burned in Oregon. You can see we had a big year in 2018. Y'all probably remember the Eagle Creek fires. But then in 2019, not so much. Y'all might remember, it was a lot more mellow last year. And the question of why, this is a graph that shows the Oregon Palmer Drought Severity Index, the PDSI. It's a table, usually goes from -4 to +4 of how much drought there is, how dry things are, with 0 being the baseline of normal. So if you look closely, you can see where it's green, where it's above the line, where we're not in drought, is last summer. And that corresponds with the very low fire season. Because as I said before, aridity makes a huge, huge difference. So I wanted to zoom out. It's not just Oregon that's in drought, but we are in patterns of long-term climate change, which I don't have to explain to you all, you know this, that's why you're here. And it shows how across the West, we're in drought. And this isn't a drought of 1 year. This is a drought now going on almost 20 years. And look, I was learning a little bit more about drought today too. So it's, you know, it's just part of this long-term region-wide pattern where we're getting longer, hotter, drier summers. And not only that, but the precipitation is falling differently in the winters. More precipitation is falling as rain and less as snow, which means it dries out both the fuel and the soil faster in the summer. And so this zooms into Oregon, and you can see us, and this was from the spring, we were already in drought, and it just kept going. When these fires that just happened hit Oregon, 80% of Oregon was under moderate drought, and 1/4 of the state was experiencing extreme drought. So those, like, there's this compounded nature of year after year after year of drought means the soil each year and the trees and the fuel each year are getting drier and drier, drier. And the anthropogenic increases in fuel aridity have approximately doubled the US forest fire area beyond that expected from natural climatic variability. So when people talk about how does climate change impact fires, the main way is it creates kindling. It dries out the forests. So the fire season becomes longer because the fuel is drier for longer. So we're not talking about specific weather events. We're talking about the long-term pattern of drought based on climate change drying out the forest fuels. So what we're doing is turning the forest into a tinderbox, right? That's the long-term patterns. But we can't talk about this fire without also talking about the weather event and how it interacted with those long-term patterns, right? Wind, going back to making our fire. If you have a fire that doesn't want to go, you blow on it, right? And you blow on it and that gets it moving. And what happened here was not unprecedented, but unusual. You know, it happens some people said every generation, every 100 years, this dry east wind event. And it coincided with the drought that created those super dry kindling conditions and blew up the fires. Now, one thing I want to take a little extra time to talk about, because I think it's personally really interesting, and as we're talking about fire and climate change, there's a question is, was the wind event connected to climate change, right? We can all agree that the dry forest, the kindling, is connected to climate change, but was the wind event itself, that extreme, unusual windstorm, connected? So I did a little research and I found out kind of, and I can explain why, but I would encourage people to look. There's a fantastic OPB article that dives deep into this question: was that wind event connected to climate change? Where I'm pulling out of just a very surface level to give to you. So if you're curious, check that out. So here's how the wind event might be connected to the bigger global climate change patterns. The extremes in weather that we're seeing all across the world can be connected to the jet stream, which is the high altitude river of air that circles the globe. So the jet stream that matters for the Oregon flows west over the mid latitudes of the Northern Hemisphere, and it has the ability to influence local weather conditions because it forms the boundary between and can push around high and low pressure systems. I'm just learning this all, so sounds like I'm reading to you, I am. So when the jet stream flows fast, it's flat. And when it's flat, our weather is relatively constant. It doesn't interact with our weather. But when air currents lose speed, the jet stream gets wavy. And when it gets wavy, it makes weird stuff happen to our weather. So when that powerful wind event hit Oregon on Labor Day, the jet stream wasn't just wavy, it was super jagged with big peaks and dips. Now people think, and climate scientists are still researching this, but they think that those variations in the jet stream, it getting really wavy or jaggedy and interacting with local weather patterns and making them go all crazy, is because of changes to the overall global climate patterns. And researchers are still trying to look into that more to figure out like how much more of this is coming, right? We know that weather patterns are getting more extreme, and trying to find that, and we know they're connected to the jet stream, but trying to figure out what the causality or the causation is between global warming and the jet stream. So that's a little wonky, but I really want to be able to, for us to speak from an informed basis when we're talking about how these fires, these particular fires in Oregon, were exacerbated because of climate change. We know for certain that climate change is drying out the forest. We know for sure that wind had something to do, or had everything to do, with blowing up the fires. We think that the wind is getting more extreme and unpredictable because of climate change. So that's what I can on that, and I'm happy to talk about it more in the questions. But that's what we got. So where do we go from here? So there's a reality that would make it easy to deny climate change, blame it on the forest, and cut more trees down. And that is a reality that has a lot of advocates, starting with the president in the White House, who recently said, as you might have noticed, about climate change, that like coronavirus, it's a miracle. It's just going to go away. It'll just start getting cooler. About the forests, it's just because California and Oregon did not clean up our forest floors. And if we would have cleaned our forest floors, none of this would have happened. So that's the Trumpistas. And then almost more troubling is the voice that's coming out of Oregon, the timber unity voice that was published in the Washington Post in an op-ed in September 12th, when the fires were still raging, that blamed all of the fires squarely on lack of active forest management, or lack of logging, as they would say. They also managed to blame Black Lives Matter protesters for it, and make Governor Brown sound like she's batshit crazy. So it's worth reading just to understand what the other side is saying, but I advise taking an Advil afterwards. Those voices are gaining strength and gaining popularity. Timber Unity is a very strong and growing group in Portland and in Oregon. And they really love the message that fires are because of forests, and getting rid of forests is the way to stop them. And this isn't new. For years, the timber industry has been trying to pin forest fires on environmentalists and environmental laws, and have had active campaigns to do so. The timber industry propaganda would have you believe that logging forests keeps them green, and not logging them turns them into charred moonscapes. I want to just speak to that because I think that we're going to have our hands cut out, or a fight on our hands in the future based on that rhetoric. Oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be done. I'm going to go quick. This is the fire that just burned. It shows that there is a lot, all of that pink, all of that brown is all logged forest. The pink is privately held forests that have already been logged, and that's what the holiday fire just burned through. Now, the fact that the fire burned through it doesn't necessarily mean that the fire burned badly or more severely. We need to get a little finer grain there, but we do know that when a fire, the Douglas complex, burned through both private and public lands, areas that have been clear-cut and older forests, in 2013, it burned way more severely in industrial managed forest plantations. So what about thinning? People say, well, what about, we're not talking about clear cutting or industrial management, we just want to thin the forests to decrease some of that fuel that's grown in since fire exclusion started. And you know, that argument makes more sense ecologically. However, practically, it just does not work. Because if you can see this on the second line of trees, there's a tiny tip of one tree that's burning. That is the 1% of thinning treatments that actually experience fires when, hi, my son, I want to see. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by my child, as working from home does. That's the 1% of thins that actually experience a fire. 1%. You cannot predict where a fire is going to burn, and thins are only effective for 10 to 20 years after they went in. So even if we thinned the entire forest, there's a very, which we can't do because it costs a lot, there's a tiny likelihood of that actually working. And now there's the issue of, well, I'm going to skip this. We can talk more about carbon and logging later, but I'm running out of time. So I want to talk a little bit about an alternate reality that makes a lot more sense would look like in terms of forest management. I'd like you to, I want to keep, no, actually I need you to go. Give me some space. So where do we go from here in a way that makes sense? We want to focus on building community resiliency and supporting public health, because these actually work, unlike thinning or industrial logging. This looks like a couple of things. Buzz through this, hopefully we'll have time to have more in-depth conversations about all of this. One is changing zoning to limit development in fire-prone areas. This is in Southern Oregon. A lot of this area just burned, and the houses are building way up into these hillsides. Another is one that would have been fantastic to have in place the past 2 weeks, is public investments in air filters and public smoke shelters. using public dollars to treat smoke as a public health issue, which we all just experienced, it very much is. I have an asthmatic housemate who tried to get away from the smoke and he couldn't. He drove in every direction and eventually just had to come home because there was no way out. Harden homes with fire-resistant material, another place where government funds could be fantastic as an investment. There's whole labs who burn down houses to figure out how to make them more fire-resistant, and all that information is out there. And maintaining defensible space within 100 feet of homes. As you know, many of you might have seen pictures of the towns that just burned. The houses are gone, but the trees are still standing. It's often a home ignition issue, and we can deal with that. And then another thing is learning to live with fire, right? We can work from the community out. We also need to learn to live with fire, to expect that we're going to have more of it, because we should on our landscape. We can end full fire suppression, increase the use of wildland fire management and prescribed fire, and work with traditional ecological land stewards. Like, this is Margot Robbins from the cultural, I think it's the Fire Cultural Land Council in the Yurok tribe down in Northern California. So what's the state of Oregon doing? And this is hopefully will bleed into the action. They had a wildfire council that came up with a lot of suggestions. Some of those suggestions incorporated all those adaptation suggestions that I just had, but when it came to actually passing a bill, they ditched all those adaptation suggestions and just focused on thinning. Yeah, happily the Republicans walked, so the bill didn't pass because it was kind of crappy. But all these groups, including 350 PDX, you all, signed a letter to the governor that said, hey, focusing on backcountry thinning and fire suppression is the wrong way to go. We need to focus on community solutions. And I think we're going to have to do it again, because obviously we want to do something, and there is something to do. It's just not backcountry logging. I want to make it clear that the devastating losses we just had in Oregon are humanitarian crises, not ecological crises. And we have got to focus on solutions that center that. Because fire destroys houses, but it rejuvenates forests. And anything that does not focus on communities out and rebuilding and making communities more resiliency is a wasted opportunity and really missing the large picture. I'm gonna just end with sending you all love. It has been a hard year, a hard couple of weeks, and I'm glad to be in the struggle with you. And I know that was a lot, really short, but I don't know if I have time for questions, but Chris and Deneen can tell us if we're gonna have more conversation.
Thanks, Brenna. That was brilliant. You're so cool. You're like parenting, you're a lawyer, you're giving presentations about climate science. Yeah, you're pretty amazing. And we're running a little bit behind. I think hearing from Brenna was worth it. And I'm gonna maybe suggest some creative facilitation in which we combine any time for questions with the time that we were gonna do the action in. We're gonna like set up the action, and people would have a few minutes, and we'd turn off the sound and put on some music or whatever, and people could do that. Let's combine them, because why not? Let's give it a go. So I'm gonna share my screen. If Brenna, you could undo your screen sharing, I can force you to. Okay. I'm gonna share this screen, and I lose the chat. Do I? No, I hope not. So bearing in mind everything that Brenna just said, we're in danger of our legislators in Oregon listening to this rhetoric and saying, okay, we need to do something for fire. We need to pass all these bills to do all this backcountry logging and like cut down all these trees to stop fire. And we know it's ineffective and it's a climate bomb. So we should probably have somewhat of a voice on the other side to let them know that that's probably a bad idea. So I think you can see the screen. Step one, if you don't know who your legislators are, both your Oregon state representative and your senator, you can find it in that link that I put in the chat. And on there, you can find both who they are and their email address or their mailing address. And if you're the type of person who likes analog, you can write on paper a little letter based on these talking points. Or if you're an email person, you can write it on there, and you can do that. There's some talking points here. Letters are always generally better if you write from your own heart and from your own circumstance, rather than just copying a form letter. I'm going to copy a form letter in there, in the chat, just in case anyone's feeling lazy, because it's definitely better than nothing. But if you can edit it or make it your own or write your own thing and send it, and especially if you come up with your own subject line that's different from all the others, which I've not suggested one, then it just has much more of an impact. Okay, Zoom doesn't let you fully do it. But yeah, so people can get on with doing that. But if anyone has any questions for Brenna, I'd say just unmute yourself and go for it. Or put a star in the chat and I can call on you, either way.
Brenna, I had a question about the Tillamook burn, which was enormous before climate. Could you help me understand what enabled that fire to be so extreme?
Well, I think one of the things is we were still, if you remember that chart with the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, we were still coming out of that long, warm, dry period. And it was also a really, really windy day. It was the Columbus Day windstorms. And so it was another combination of dry fuels and a large wind event. And that's typically what gets the big burns going on the west side. West side forests don't burn as frequently, but when they do burn, it's usually in these extreme weather events. So they burn big and hot. And so the Tillamook burn was another one of those patterns.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. But I will say what happened to the Tillamook forest, we're really hoping doesn't happen now. And there was a massive, enormous salvage logging after the Tillamook burn. And I think people are going to be, some people will definitely be pushing for that in this case. And we're hoping to not have that happen to the forests.
I have a question. Why did Portland not burn, and do you think it will in the future?
We're lucky. I think if there had been another day of wind, honestly, we might have. The weather changed, and that's what saved us. I mean, the Riverside fire that got to Estacada, got to Molalla, Oregon City. I live in kind of extreme southwest Portland, right across the river from Milwaukee, and it's surrounded by a forest, and we were afraid. We were on level 1 evacuation. And so I really think that it was just the wind dying down. If we see another event like this and the fire hits Portland, it absolutely could burn.
Thank you.
So it's sobering. Oh, and there's a question about the justification for not shutting down the power. It's completely, I don't know what the company is going to say, but there's nothing that requires the power companies to do so. And they haven't before. This was one of the first instances that they had. I think they're learning their lesson from California's fires. I have no idea why PGE chose to shut down part of their grid, but not the rest. I mean, it was disastrous results. And I see something from Felice about the issues with salvage logging. In short, I mean, I'll focus on some of the carbon impacts because I know that's one of the things the forest group is really working on is after a fire goes through an area, you know, it doesn't actually take that much of the carbon. Most of the carbon is stored in tree trunks and in the soil, which are all left standing after a fire. And so salvage logging removes the tree trunk, loses all that carbon and compacts the soil. But not only that, the forest is very ecologically fragile for the first couple of years after a fire. They grow back beautifully, but it takes a while. And the first couple of years after a fire is the only window with which you can salvage log or post-fire logging is recoup the financial value of the tree. So they have to go in when it's still really fresh on the landscape. So it's just, you know, I lived in Southern Oregon during the Biscuit fire in the aftermath, and we would always say it's like mugging a burn victim. Like you gotta give them a little bit of chance to recover. Hopefully never mug them, but at least when they can fight back.
Cool analogy to finish on.
Yes. And
Hello?
hello?
All right, one more.
Brenna?
Mm-hmm.
Brenna?
Yes.
Yeah. I've been part of I'm part of Bark Out, and I live on the mountain, and I was one of the ones where they shut out their electricity for 7 days thank God I still have my house. But, you know, I just in the right in time, I have it right here in front of me. There's a logger, and the article was clear cuts are ugly, but they can also be useful. and I was writing a rebuttal, but then the fires started. Now I'm kind of shifting, and I don't know if you guys know that they're going to be logging the Zigzag, the Salmon River, the Mud Creek. There's a lot of land on our beautiful mountain that they are going to probably start logging after Christmas. And we got all the our questions while I was in the scoping period. I took all your classes and letter writing, and when I got everything back, it said no significant impact, no significant impact. The environment, the this or that, but nobody really talked about the fires. And now I'm kind of reshifting and thinking, wow, you know, I'm doing research on fires, and I understand that old growth forests, like what my daughter and I hiked through in Mount Hood, you'll see the flames, you'll see it black, like about 8 feet up, but it you know, it burns all the underbrush, and the trees are left standing. And then when they want to log, and they say, the Forest Service here, it says they want to make it a healthy forest. And like you said, when they plant, those are, it's faster. And I think the forester up here, the rangers told me that they wait 3 years to plant.
Mm-hmm.
And so is our focus going to be shifting to try to stop them from doing that? Is there any point in, you know, I mean, I feel really hopeless with this whole thing up here. I wanted to give up, and then I talked to one of your gals, what's her name? Brittany. Yeah. And so can you talk a little bit about that up here? There's so much population of people up here. We live up here, you know, so.
Absolutely. I'll do it really briefly. And
Yeah.
I think that that's something that the Forest and Climate Group has also been looking at is, you know, Patricia's talking about the zigzag timber sale on Mount Hood, where they're justifying it because of forest health, which is what they like to say for all logging. I read Steve Weiland's thing about clear cutting might be good. And fire really does change this dynamic. And I think a lot of, you know, as I was saying, our expectation has shifted. People forget that the West Side is born of fire and experiences fire, and they haven't really been talking about it. But I think that is really going to change. And I'm hoping as the Forest Service, you know, it's got a lot on its hands right now. Most of the Clackamas River Ranger District just burned. So in some ways, I'm hoping that puts the zigzag on hold, because the Clackamas people were planning it because they don't log in zigzag. But I don't think we're going to be able to go forward without really addressing this fire issue. And we will keep fighting that zigzag sale and especially talk about why it's so important that we have mature and old growth trees to provide climate refugia, to keep it more moist and cool, and to store the carbon, like for so many reasons, and to be more fire resilient. For so many reasons, that's a better ecosystem when the fires come through. So I got to give it back to 350. And I have a family Zoom call with my mom and my brothers, so I'm going to duck out. It was so good to see you all. Thank you. I put my email in the chat if you have more questions, and I look forward to talking with you more. Bye.
Thanks, Brenna. You're the best.
Oh,
Thanks,
Lights
Brenna.
out. Cool. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'll put that slide back up at the end so you can finish writing your letters if you've not. Maybe I'll even put it in an email to everyone afterwards. But now I'm just going to pass it on to Deneen.
Hi, everyone. That was so amazing from Brenna. My name's Deneen. I'm the campaign manager at 350 PDX. I just wanted to share a few things that you can do to take action right now to support communities who were really affected by the wildfires, in addition to writing to your legislators like Chris just showed us. The whole climate movement and movements for social justice throughout Oregon really stepped into gear as soon as this happened and started doing some pretty incredible mutual aid work to support all the communities who are really affected by this. And honestly, it was the only thing giving me hope for a long time, and still is. So I just wanted to share some updates about this. A lot of you have probably been involved with us. You've been at the Sierra Club helping us go through donations, but basically, we finished our big supply drive, and we successfully shipped several dozen large truckloads of supplies down to Southern Oregon and other parts of Central Oregon who were really hit by these fires. A lot of it went to the Rogue Valley, Phoenix and Talent, Medford, Ashland area. A lot went to Woodburn to support farmers who were gathering food without proper respirators. So we have finished that big supply drive that was happening for a while for now, but we are still looking for people who would be interested in driving our last truck down to Southern Oregon. So if you can do that, I'll leave a contact information in the chat. And that would be very appreciated. Another thing, maybe you've also heard, one of our really close partners who we've been working with to stop Jordan Cove LNG for the whole time we've been around as an organization, Rogue Climate, their office burned in Phoenix. They are an incredible group of people. A lot of their staff and volunteers have had to evacuate, and some have lost their homes. And in the chat, I'm going to drop a really great op-ed that was published over the weekend from 2 of the staff members at Rogue Climate called "We Work in Climate Justice, Our Office Burned Down Thanks to Climate Change." And then finally, donating to the Rogue Valley Relief Fund is one of the most important things that we need people doing right now. Their goal is to distribute $500,000 over the next year to directly help people who are most impacted. So that's all on that for now. And thank you to everyone who helped us gather supplies and bring them down. It was a huge, huge success so far. I'm going to now pass it over to Peter from the Defund Divest team, who is going to lead us in the next little part of our meeting, where we're going to start to tackle some of the big culprits of why these fires are becoming more extreme, and the fossil fuel industry and those who are funding it. So take it away, Peter.
All right. I'll try to be quick here, but unfortunately the virus has changed a lot of our activities, and we originally were ramping up to hold Chase, JP Morgan Chase Bank more accountable for its funding. It's the largest funder of fossil fuel companies in the world, and various groups have been putting more and more pressure on. So the Stop the Money Pipeline Coalition, which we're part of, I guess, wanted to do a virtual takeover of Chase Bank, since we can't physically march into Chase Banks right now in a socially distant way. And it came about that someone suggested that we make it into kind of a game, make it fun. And so I wrote some software, got some software about maps. And let's see, share the screen here. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
So we worked with the Stop the Money Pipeline folks and put together a national takeover that has a map of the country. And as you can look at each state, and you can see how many Chase branches are associated with each state. And we're encouraging people to use Google Maps to leave bad reviews on each branch in the states. And then you come and report back on our screen here how many reviews you left for which state. And gradually the states are going to turn from a nasty red to a wonderful green. And you can see we already have some progress here. We have over 680 reviews posted so far. So it'd be great if other folks could come in and help. We can see that Oregon is looking pretty good. We have 81 reviews and we only have 107 branches. But California, it has 979 branches. So we've got it's a high bar there for California. And the other places we encourage people to post reviews on Chase are Facebook, on Chase's Facebook page, and Twitter, and on Instagram. And below the map and the place where you leave the reviews are all sorts of great information people put together, facts about JP Morgan Chase, sample reviews that you can copy and paste and just put in. If you're a little more savvy, you can maybe download these images and post them with your reviews. And you know, these graphics are a very effective way to catch people's attention in Facebook or everywhere else. And there's even some GIFs with the poor little burning planet running away. And then all sorts of ways, examples of how to do social media reviews on Twitter and Facebook and stuff. So this is just a way for people to get active online and make it a little bit fun that we have a contest here. My focus has been on Washington, D.C., because I figure that maybe our senators go to a Chase Bank occasionally. So I managed to make Washington, D.C. a little more green. So anyway, this is what we've got going, and it's just a way to interact. And you know, 680 reviews has got to get their attention that across the country, their branches are being badly reviewed by people. And the more different people do it, the harder it will be for them to, you know, filter it out.
This is awesome, Peter. Thank you so much for building this really cool website and making it nice and easy for us to leave these reviews.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and these are, as Sue said, this is happening all over the country right now. So it's really exciting. And if you want, as we did with writing to our legislators, you can start, we'll drop the link for this in the chat. Do you have that up, Peter? You want to drop that so everyone can join in with us right now?
The link here.
Oh, there it is. Sue has it.
Oh, Sue did it. Sue sent it already?
Yes.
Okay, good. I knew she would. So, yeah, I had some of my own pictures. I posted, you know, pictures of the trees covered in smoke in Portland. And this, I've been posting this latest one. This is my backdrop, but this is a satellite map that shows the smoke coming from the west coast, meeting up with the hurricanes hitting the east coast. So I think that's an incredible image of what's happening to our climate. So that's what I had. If there's any questions, or Chris could take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Maybe at the end, I mean, I'll put the forest slide back up, and at the end, maybe people can, before they disappear off into the world and go eat your tea and do your other stuff, then maybe we can all just like do it in the first 10 minutes after this call, if we have time. Yeah. So all we've got left is a couple of team pitches of other stuff exciting going on that needs some volunteer help. So let's do it. Deneen, do you want to talk about the get out the vote stuff and then the fossil fuel resistance stuff?
Yes, I will. And thank you so much, Peter and the Defund Divest team. Yeah, again, my name is Deneen. I'm on staff here at 350. I wanted to let people know about a new short-term team that we have right now, our Get Out the Vote team. And we're doing this to recognize that obviously all of our work is incredibly impacted by what will happen in November. And so we are doing everything we can to make sure that as many people as possible get out and vote. And so we are sending out phone banking, postcard writing, letter writing opportunities that are happening, mostly hosted by our partners at other 350 groups around the country who are in key swing states. And we're sending them to people's inboxes about once a week. So if you want to receive those emails, we will drop the link to sign up for that team in the chat. And you can get those events sent to you every week to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make those results, to make sure everyone can vote. That's one team. And then another team I work with is our fossil fuel resistance team, one of our longest standing teams at 350. And right now we're in a really, really busy time because we're in a 30-day comment period on the Kalama methanol refinery, which is a proposal to build the world's largest fracked gas to methanol refinery that would be on the Columbia River in Kalama, Washington, just 40 miles from here. I wish I was kidding with everything happening right now. That is still moving forward. But we have an important, really, really important window right now to influence the Washington Department of Ecology to make sure that they deny this project and stop taking and buying the claims from the project's backer, Northwest Innovation Works. So there, at this same time next week, there's going to be a really great comment writing workshop hosted by our friends at the Washington Sierra Club. And we would love for you to join us at that. And there you can learn all about this big project from the experts and from people in the community who would be most impacted by it, and write a comment with us in community and learn all the best talking points. Also, tomorrow there's going to be 2 virtual hearings about this, where you can join in and listen to testimony and deliver testimony too. So I'm gonna give all this information in the chat so you can join us. And this is one of the many campaigns that we do on the fossil fuel resistance team. So if you would like to join our team and get plugged into our email list, you can leave your email in the chat.
Nice one, Janine. Sue, you want to talk?
Thanks, everybody. I just had a couple more things from the Defund Divest team. Woohoo, great team. Everybody should join us. But there's a couple more things coming up other than the takeover that Peter just talked about that he's done such a great job with. It's really fun and good trouble, and you feel a little naughty, but it feels really good. So I really encourage you to do that. But the other thing that's coming up October 2nd, a week from Friday, is the National Day of Solidarity with our Indigenous brothers and sisters up in more in northern central part of the United States, the Keystone, Line 3, and what's the third one? But it's this really cool day of solidarity. I'm going to share my screen if I can. Maybe I can't. But I'll put in the chat the page that you can click on, go learn more information about the National Day of Solidarity for those fighting tar sands. And there's going to be some great speakers virtually, the Indigenous folks, the frontline folks, from 11 to 12:30 on that Friday. And then we'll probably be doing some local actions, very COVID safe, at some targets like Chase and Liberty Mutual in Portland. So we're getting really excited about that in the next week and a half, and it'd be great to have you join us virtually. And if you're interested in doing anything else, let me know or let Denise know. But there's the link there about the National Day of Solidarity for tar sands. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue.
Nice one, Sue. Thank you. I wonder if, Felice, did you have anything more to add about the first team?
Yeah, just real quick, I wanted to talk about another campaign our team is working on, which is to help push the city as they adopt revisions to the city tree code to make those revisions as climate friendly as possible. Portland has a really large urban heat island effect where neighborhoods that have few trees get really hot compared to neighborhoods with a lot of trees. And they're proposing continuing to allow industrial lands to not be covered by the tree code. So we're encouraging the city to include industrial lands and reduce the size of the tree that you can cut down without any sort of repercussions. And that this is happening right now. City Council will vote on it on October 29th. And the commissions that are making recommendations are just wrapping up their hearings. And so there'll be some pressure campaign around City Council. I think it could be a really cool way to influence the trees that we have here in Portland and grow the urban forest. So we'd love to have more folks join us to work on that and some state forest issues.
Lovely. Thank you, Felice. And yeah, if anyone's interested in joining these teams, you can put your email in the chat, or maybe the team leads can also put their emails in the chat so you can reach out to them. Are there any other teams? I got a couple more, but I'm wondering if any other team leads are on the call. I've not really been monitoring who's here.
Yeah, the Green New Deal team is,
Ooh.
yeah, and so we meet on the last Tuesday. We're meeting September 29th at 6:30, and I'll put my email on the chat. So if you want to come to the meeting, we'll put you on our list, but it is 6:30, and we basically are focusing on education around the Green New Deal.
Mark, this is Harriet, and there were emails about switching to 7 o'clock because of the Democratic Party of Oregon Green New Deal. They had a candidates thing that ends at 7. So I think we were going to meet at 7.
Haven't made that final decision. That's why I didn't say anything.
Oh, okay. So 6:30 or 7.
It could be 7, but 6:30 is 7. But what you do is send me an email, and we'll give you the when we figure out when we're going to meet. We'll let you know.
Thanks, Mark and Harriet. Any other teams want to say anything? 5, 4, 3, 2. Cool. Well, Debbie Garman from the Washington County team, because we have a team in Washington County, couldn't be here, but she sent me a thing to talk about, which is that they are fighting a bad land use ordinance in Washington County, a bad revision that's going through, and they are striking with the group called Fridays for Future on Saturday, which I'm not going to comment on. But this Saturday in Hillsborough from 11 till noon, they're doing a strike. And also, if anyone's in Hillsborough, Aloha, Cornelius, or Forest Grove, they're mobilizing a lot of Get Out the Vote postcards and could use more hands on decks with that. So if anyone's in Washington County, you can reach out to Debbie, who I'll put in the chat, and she'll set you up with some local actions in Washington County. Yeah.
I also just wanted to give a quick plug for our BIPOC caucus, Black, Indigenous, People of Color. If you identify as BIPOC and you want to be in a community of other BIPOC climate activists, share community and take action together, I'm dropping our colleague Indy's email in the chat.
Nice. Thanks, Deneen. Okay, the last thing from me is there's always quite a few new volunteers on these calls, which is great. And if you're a new volunteer and you're trying to figure out your place in 350 PDX, we'll be having a volunteer orientation soon. It's actually been a while. We've been a bit lax in the last few months with everything going on in the world. It's kind of like, but we're going to pick it up again. And so apologies if I've not followed up with you yet, but please do. I will follow up with you soon, but please do give me an email if you are new and you want to figure out what's going on and just want to like chat about 350 PDX and get more involved. So yeah, you should do that. Cool. Is there anyone else who has an announcement or anything else before we come to a close?
It was so wonderful to see all of your faces.
Yeah, thanks for spending your last day of summer with us on Zoom as the sun goes down. Tomorrow will be autumn. There'll be a new season. Everything's going to get better, I'm sure of it. So I'm gonna share my screen so you can see this forest action again. So if you didn't finish that, then I'll leave that up for 5 or 10 minutes or whatever, and you can do that. But apart from that, thanks for coming and see you soon. You can take yourself off mute and shout bye if you like. That's always fun.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everybody. Fight for climate. Fight for the trees.
Happy equinox.
Good to see all your faces. Bye-bye.
Bye. Let's see, what am I gonna do? Where's the feedback? Okay, so.
Someone just asked where where we'll be posting the recording of this call. So I just want to say it for everyone, but we have a YouTube channel, 350 PDX. So that's where we have all the recordings of our meetings when we remember to record them.
We'll put it on Facebook too.
Mm-hmm.